The text message arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in March, lighting up the phone that sat on the passenger seat of a Kenworth W900 rolling through the darkness of rural Tennessee. Frank Delgado glanced at the screen, expecting a message from the dispatch office about his morning delivery in Nashville. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. "He's hitting my mom again. Please come quick. I'm scared." Frank blinked at the message, certain he had misread it. He pulled the truck into a rest area just ahead, his heart pounding as he picked up the phone and read the words again. The number was unfamiliar, a 615 area code that matched the Nashville region, but nothing in his contacts. His first instinct was to dismiss it as a wrong number, maybe some teenager playing a prank. But something in those words, the raw desperation behind them, stopped him from putting the phone down. He typed back, "I think you have the wrong number. Who is this?" The response came immediately, the speed of someone whose fingers were trembling as they typed. "Uncle Ray, please help. He's hurting her bad. This time she's crying. I can hear her through the wall, please." Frank's throat tightened. Whoever this was, they genuinely believed they were reaching out to someone who could help. Someone named Uncle Ray. Instead, they had reached a 53-year-old truck driver from San Antonio who was 300 miles away from home and completely unprepared for this moment. He sat in the darkened cab of his truck, the engine idling, the weight of responsibility settling over him like a physical thing. He could ignore the messages. He could tell this person to call 911 and be done with it. He could go back to his scheduled route and pretend this had never happened. But he could not stop thinking about his own daughter, Maria, now 28, and living in Phoenix. He thought about what he would want someone to do if she were the one sending desperate messages in the middle of the night. Frank typed carefully, "This isn't Uncle Ray. You texted the wrong number, but I want to help. How old are you? What's your address?" The response took longer this time, and Frank could almost feel the confusion and fear on the other end. "Who is this? I thought this was my uncle's new number." Frank took a deep breath before responding. "My name is Frank. I'm a truck driver. I don't know how you got my number, but I'm worried about you. Is your mom okay? Do you need me to call the police?" A pause. Then, "I'm 12. My name is Maya. The man hurting my mom is her boyfriend, Derek. He's been drinking. I'm hiding in my closet. I can hear things breaking downstairs. I'm so scared." Frank felt his hands begin to shake. A 12-year-old girl hiding in a closet while violence erupted below her. The image burned itself into his mind. "Maya," he typed, "I need you to listen to me. Where do you live? Give me your address and I'm going to send help right now." The address came through. 1847 Maple Creek Road, Goodlettsville, Tennessee. Frank quickly pulled up his GPS. Goodlettsville was about 45 minutes from his current location, just north of Nashville. He could be there in less than an hour if he pushed it, but first, he needed to make sure help was on the way. He dialed 911, explained the situation as quickly and clearly as he could. The dispatcher took the information, asked several questions, and assured him that officers would be sent to the address immediately. Frank thanked her and hung up. But something still gnawed at him, something that would not let him simply drive away. He texted Maya, "I called 911. Police are on their way." "Are you still safe?" she replied. "I can hear sirens. But what if they don't believe me? Derek is really nice when other people are around. He always talks his way out of it. The police have come before and nothing happens." Frank felt a cold anger building in his chest. He knew the type. Charming on the outside, dangerous behind closed doors. The kind of person who could look a police officer in the eye and lie through his teeth while his victim stood silent beside him, too afraid to contradict him. "I'm coming too," Frank typed. "I'm about 45 minutes away. I'll be there as soon as I can. Stay hidden until the police arrive. Don't come out of that closet no matter what. You're really coming?" The words appeared on his screen, and Frank could hear the disbelief in them. "I'm really coming," he typed back. "I promise." He put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway, pushing the speed limit as much as he dared. The night rushed past his windows, a blur of darkness punctuated by the occasional flash of headlights from passing cars. His phone buzzed again. The police are here. Derek is talking to them in the front yard. My mom is inside. She's crying, but she won't say anything. She never does. Frank's jaw tightened. He pressed the accelerator a little harder. The minutes crawled by as he navigated the winding roads toward Goodlettsville. His phone continued to light up with updates from Maya, each one painting a clearer picture of the nightmare unfolding in that house. They're leaving. The police are leaving. Derek told them everything was fine. Mom backed him up. She always does. Frank's hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He typed at a red light. I'm still coming. Where's Derek now? In the living room, drinking more. Mom's in the kitchen. I can hear him yelling at her again. It's going to get worse. It always gets worse after the police leave. Frank ran the red light. 20 minutes later, he turned onto Maple Creek Road, a quiet residential street lined with modest houses and overgrown lawns. Number 1847 was near the end, a single-story home with peeling paint and a pickup truck parked in the driveway. Frank pulled his rig to a stop at the curb, the massive truck looking absurdly out of place in the suburban setting. He grabbed his phone and texted Maya, I'm outside. The big truck at the curb. What's happening in there? It stopped for a while, but I think he's asleep on the couch now. Mom's in her room. I can hear her crying through the wall. Frank stepped down from the cab, the cool night air hitting his face. He was not entirely sure what he was doing here or what he could possibly accomplish. He was just a truck driver, not a police officer, not a social worker, not anyone with any real authority or expertise in situations like this. But he was here, and he had made a promise. He walked up to the front door, his boots crunching on the gravel driveway. Through the window, he could see the flickering light of a television and the silhouette of a man slumped on a couch. Derek, presumably, sleeping off whatever he had been drinking. Frank hesitated, then knocked on the door. 3 firm raps that echoed in the quiet night. Nothing happened for a long moment. Then a light came on in the hallway, and he heard footsteps approaching. The door opened a crack, and a woman's face appeared. She was maybe 35, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and a bruise forming under her left eye that she was trying to hide with her hand. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ma'am," Frank said, keeping his voice low and calm, "my name is Frank Delgado. Your daughter texted me by accident tonight. She was trying to reach someone named Ray." The woman's eyes widened, and she glanced nervously over her shoulder. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, starting to close the door. Frank put his hand on the frame, gentle but firm. "Please," he said. "I know what's happening here. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to make sure you and your daughter are safe." Tears sprang to the woman's eyes, and her hand dropped from her face, revealing the full extent of the bruise. For a moment, she looked like she might collapse right there in the doorway. "You need to go," she whispered. "If he wakes up and sees you here—" "Then come with me," Frank said. "You and Maya, right now. I'll take you somewhere safe." "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "I can't just leave. I have nowhere to go. My family is 2,000 miles away. I have no money, no car. He controls everything." Frank had heard these words before, or versions of them, from his own sister 20 years ago. She had stayed with a man who hurt her for 7 years before she finally found the courage to leave. By then, the damage had been done, physical and emotional scars that she carried to this day. He was not going to let history repeat itself, not if he could help it. "Ma'am," he said, "I have a truck with a sleeper cab parked right there at the curb. I can have you and your daughter in Nashville in 30 minutes. There are shelters there, people who can help, but you have to make that choice right now. Because if you go back inside and close this door, I don't know when you'll get another chance." The woman stared at him, her face a battlefield of fear and hope. Behind her, Frank heard a groan from the living room, the sound of someone stirring. "Jenny?" Derek's voice was slurred but angry. "Who the hell are you talking to?" The woman flinched, and Frank saw the terror flood her eyes. "Go get Maya," Frank said quietly. Right now, I'll handle him. She hesitated for one more heartbeat, then turned and ran down the hallway. Frank heard a door open, heard whispered voices, heard the rustle of hurried movement. Heavy footsteps approached the door, and then Derek was there, a big man with bloodshot eyes and fists like hammers. He looked at Frank with a mixture of confusion and rage. "Who the hell are you?" Frank stood his ground. "I'm the guy who's making sure those two get out of here safely." Derek's face twisted into a sneer. "Get off my property before I break your face." Frank had been in his share of fights over the years. He was not a young man anymore, but he was strong from years of loading and unloading freight, and he knew how to take a punch. More importantly, he knew that right now his only job was to buy time. "I don't want any trouble," Frank said calmly. "But I'm not leaving without them." Derek took a step forward, his fists clenching. Frank tensed, ready for whatever came next. But before Derek could move, Jenny appeared behind him. Maya clutched tightly to her side. The girl was small for 12, with her mother's dark hair and wide, frightened eyes. She looked at Frank like he was something out of a dream. "We're leaving," Jenny said, her voice trembling but firm. "Don't try to stop us, Derek." Derek spun around, his face contorting with rage. "You're not going anywhere. You belong to me." Jenny shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Not anymore." She pushed past him, pulling Maya with her. Derek reached for her arm, but Frank stepped between them, blocking his path. "Let them go," Frank said. Derek's eyes burned with fury. "Move." "No." For a long moment they stood there, two men facing off in the narrow doorway of a house full of pain. Frank could see the calculation happening behind Derek's eyes, the weighing of options, the assessment of risk. Finally, Derek stepped back. "This isn't over," he growled. "I'll find you, all of you." Frank did not respond. He simply backed away, keeping himself between Derek and the others until they reached the truck. He helped Jenny and Maya climb into the cab, then swung himself up into the driver's seat. As he started the engine and pulled away from the curb, he watched Derek in the rearview mirror, standing in the doorway of the house, watching them go. The rage on his face was terrifying, but the distance between them was growing with every second. Maya sat between Frank and her mother, her small body pressed close to Jenny's side. Neither of them spoke for a long time, the only sound the rumble of the engine and the hum of the tires on asphalt. Finally, Maya looked up at Frank. "You really came," she said softly. "I didn't think... I sent that text by accident. I thought you'd just ignore it." Frank glanced at her, seeing in her eyes the same mixture of fear and hope he had seen in her mother's. "I made a promise," he said simply. "I always keep my promises." Maya nodded slowly, then leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. Frank drove on through the night, the lights of Nashville growing brighter on the horizon. The shelter was a nondescript building in a quiet neighborhood, its purpose hidden behind an ordinary facade. Frank pulled the truck to a stop a block away, not wanting to draw attention with his massive rig. "This is the place," he said, handing Jenny a card with the address and phone number. "They'll take care of you, help you figure out next steps." Jenny took the card, her hands still trembling. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You didn't have to do any of this." Frank shook his head. "Yes, I did." He looked at Maya, still curled against her mother's side. "You did a brave thing tonight, reaching out for help. Don't ever forget that. No matter what happens, you have the power to change your situation. You proved that tonight." Maya nodded, her eyes glistening. "Will I ever see you again?" Frank smiled, the first real smile he had managed all night. "I drive through Nashville pretty often. Maybe I'll check in sometime, if that's okay with you." "I'd like that," Maya said. They climbed down from the cab, and Frank watched them walk toward the shelter, two figures moving through the darkness toward safety. At the door, Maya turned and waved. Frank waved back, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He sat in the idling truck for a long moment, thinking about the strange turn his night had taken. A wrong number text, a cry for help that was never meant for him. And yet here he was, having done something that might actually matter. His phone buzzed with a text from his dispatcher. "Where are you? You're behind schedule." Frank typed back, "Had an emergency. Will explain later." Back en route now. He put the truck in gear and headed toward the highway, the sun beginning to paint the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. 3 months passed before Frank heard from Maya again. He had delivered his load in Nashville that morning, gotten back on schedule, and eventually returned to his normal routine. He thought about the girl and her mother often, wondering how they were doing, hoping they had found some peace. The text came on a sunny afternoon in June, while Frank was parked at a truck stop in Oklahoma, eating a sandwich and catching up on the news. "Hey Frank, it's Maya. I don't know if you remember me." Frank smiled as he typed his response. "Of course I remember you. How are you doing?" The reply came quickly. "Good, really good actually. We're living with my grandparents in California now. Mom got a job. I started at a new school, made some friends. It's different, good different." Frank felt a warmth spread through his chest. "That's wonderful news, Maya. I'm so happy for you." Another message appeared. "I wanted to thank you again. For coming that night, for believing me, for helping us escape. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." Frank thought about that often, the what-ifs that haunted him in quiet moments. He was glad he did not have to find out. "You don't need to thank me," he typed. "You're the brave one, Maya. You reached out for help, even when you were scared." That took real courage. There was a pause before her next message. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why did you come? I mean, you didn't know us. You were hundreds of miles away. You could have just called the police and forgotten about it, but you drove all the way to our house. Why?" Frank stared at the screen for a long moment, trying to put into words something he had never fully articulated even to himself. Finally he typed, "Because someone needed help, and I was in a position to give it. That's really all there is to it, Maya. When you see someone struggling, you help if you can. That's what decent people do." A moment later, "I'm going to remember that, for the rest of my life." Frank smiled, his eyes growing moist. "Good. And someday, when you're in a position to help someone else, you'll pay it forward. That's how we make the world a little bit better, one person at a time." They exchanged a few more messages, Maya filling him in on the details of her new life, Frank sharing stories from the road. Before they said goodbye, Maya asked if she could keep texting him sometimes just to check in. "Anytime," Frank wrote back. "I'll always be here." And he meant it. The years rolled by, marked by the steady rhythm of the road. Frank watched from a distance as Maya grew up, their occasional texts becoming a thread of connection that neither of them ever forgot. She sent him a message when she made the honor roll for the first time. He replied with a string of celebration emojis and a promise to buy her ice cream the next time he was in California. She texted him on the first anniversary of that night in Tennessee, a simple message that said, "1 year free. Thank you for being the reason." Frank kept that message saved on his phone, pulling it up whenever he needed a reminder of why he did what he did. When Maya turned 16, she sent him a photo of herself behind the wheel of a car, her mother standing proudly beside her. "Got my license today," she wrote. "Mom says I'm a better driver than she is." Frank laughed and typed back, "Just remember, the big trucks always have the right of way." Her response was a laughing emoji and a promise to be careful. When she graduated from high school, Frank made a special trip to California to be there. He sat in the audience with Jenny and her parents, watching as Maya walked across the stage in her cap and gown, a young woman now confident and strong. Afterward, Maya ran to him and threw her arms around his neck. "You came," she said. "I wasn't sure if you would be able to make it." Frank hugged her back. "I told you I always keep my promises." They had dinner that night at a restaurant near the beach, the whole family together. Frank listened as Maya talked about her plans for college, her dreams of becoming a social worker, her determination to help kids like her who were trapped in dangerous situations. "I want to be like you," she said, looking at Frank with those same eyes he remembered from that night in the closet, older now but just as earnest. "I want to be the person who shows up when someone needs help." Frank felt his throat tighten. "You already are, Maya. You always have been." The conversation turned to lighter topics, laughter filling the warm evening air. But Frank kept that moment close to his heart, a reminder of the unexpected ways our lives can intersect with others, the ripples of a single act of kindness spreading outward in ways we can never predict. 2 more years passed. Frank was nearing retirement now, his joints aching from decades on the road, his hair more grey than black. He had cut back on his routes, taking only the shorter hauls that kept him closer to home. The text from Maya came on a quiet Tuesday evening in September, just as he was settling in for the night in his small apartment in San Antonio. "Frank, I need your help. It's happening again." His blood ran cold. He typed back immediately. "What's happening? Are you okay?" The response came quickly. "Not me. My friend's little sister. She's 13. Her stepdad is hurting her mom. She doesn't know what to do. She's scared to call the police. I gave her your number. I hope that's okay." Before Frank could respond, a new message appeared from an unknown number. "Hello? Is this Frank? Maya said you might be able to help me." Frank stared at the screen, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settling over him. He thought about how tired he was, how close to the end of his driving career. He thought about all the reasons he could say no, could tell this stranger to call the authorities and leave him out of it. But then he thought about Maya, about that night 5 years ago, about the girl in the closet who had reached out to the wrong number and found help anyway. He typed back, "Tell me everything." The story poured out, a familiar nightmare in a different setting. A 13-year-old girl named Lily, hiding in her bedroom while her mother was hurt downstairs. A stepfather who controlled everything, who isolated the family from friends and relatives, who seemed so charming in public that no one believed the truth. Frank listened, asked questions, gathered information. This time, the address was in El Paso, nearly 600 miles away. Too far for him to drive tonight, but close enough that he could be there by morning. "Lily," he typed, "I'm going to help you. But first I need to make some calls. Stay hidden, keep your phone on silent. Text me if anything changes." Her response was immediate. "Thank you. Maya said you would help. She said you saved her life." Frank smiled despite the gravity of the situation. "Maya is a smart girl. Now let me make those calls." He dialed the number for the El Paso police, explained the situation, gave them the address. Then he called a domestic violence hotline and spoke with a counselor, gathering resources and information that Lily and her mother would need. Finally, he texted Maya, "I'm driving to El Paso tonight. I'll be there by morning." Her response came with a heart emoji. "I knew you would. Thank you, Frank." For everything. He packed a small bag, climbed into his pickup truck and hit the road. The highway stretched before him, a ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the darkness. Frank had made this kind of drive 1,000 times, but tonight felt different. Tonight, he was not hauling freight. He was carrying something far more precious: hope. The sun was just rising when Frank pulled into El Paso, the desert landscape painted in shades of orange and gold. He followed the GPS to the address Lily had given him, a rundown apartment complex on the edge of town. He parked across the street and texted Lily, "I'm here. What's the situation?" The response came after a long, anxious pause. "He left for work an hour ago. Mum's still in bed. She won't talk to me. I don't know what to do." Frank thought for a moment, then typed, "Is there a back door? Somewhere you and your mom could leave without being seen?" "Yes, through the kitchen." "Okay, I'm going to come to that door. Tell your mom there's someone here who wants to help, someone who's been through what she's going through. Can you do that?" A pause. Then, "I'll try." Frank got out of the truck and made his way around the building, finding the back entrance just as Lily had described. He waited, the minutes stretching like hours, until finally the door cracked open. A woman's face appeared, pale and drawn, with dark circles under her eyes and a split lip that had not quite healed. Behind her, a teenage girl with frightened eyes and her mother's auburn hair. "You're Frank?" the woman asked, her voice barely audible. "I am. And you must be Diane. Your daughter told me what's been happening. I'm here to help you get out." Diane shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand. He'll find us. He always finds us. There's nowhere to go. Frank had heard these words before. He knew the fear that drove them, the hopelessness that made escape seem impossible. There are places, he said gently, safe places where he can't find you. People who specialize in helping families like yours start over, but you have to take the first step. You have to choose to leave. Diane looked at her daughter, at the fear in Lily's eyes, and something shifted in her expression. "For how long?" she asked. "How long have I been putting her through this?" "It doesn't matter," Frank said. "What matters is what you do right now." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Diane took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay," she said. "We'll come with you." They left through the back door, carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs and whatever they could fit in their pockets. Frank led them to his truck, helped them inside, and pulled away from the apartment complex before anyone could see them go. "Where are we going?" Lily asked from the back seat. Frank had done his research during the drive. "There's a shelter in Albuquerque," he said, "about 4 hours from here. They specialize in helping families escape domestic violence. They can set you up with new identities, help you find jobs, get Lily enrolled in a new school." Diane stared out the window, her expression unreadable. "I've been so stupid," she said quietly, "staying with him all this time, putting my daughter in danger." Frank shook his head. "You're not stupid. You were scared. There's a difference." "He hurt me," she said, "so many times." But the worst part was watching Lily grow up in that house, knowing what she was seeing, what she was learning. I told myself it wasn't that bad, that he would change, that we had nowhere else to go. Frank glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Those are all lies that abusers want you to believe," he said. "They isolate you. They make you think you have no options. But you always have options, Diane. You proved that today." Lily leaned forward from the back seat. "Mom, I'm proud of you," she said softly, "for leaving, for choosing us." Diane reached back and squeezed her daughter's hand, fresh tears rolling down her cheeks. They drove in silence for a while, the desert landscape scrolling past the windows. Frank thought about all the miles he had traveled in his life, all the loads he had hauled, all the people he had met along the way. None of it compared to these drives, these moments when he was carrying something more valuable than any cargo. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "How's it going?" He handed the phone to Lily. "Why don't you update her?" he said. Lily took the phone and began typing, a small smile crossing her face for the first time since Frank had met her. The shelter in Albuquerque was tucked away in a residential neighborhood, its location carefully hidden to protect the families inside. Frank pulled up to the gate and texted the code that the hotline counselor had given him. A woman met them at the door, her smile warm and welcoming. She introduced herself as Patricia, the shelter director, and led them inside. "You'll be safe here," she told Diane and Lily. "We have everything you need. Beds, food, clothes, counselors. Whatever you need to start over, we'll help you find it." Frank hung back as Patricia showed them around, content to let the professionals take over. His part in this story was ending, but theirs was just beginning. Before he left, Lily ran back to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Thank you," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "You saved us." Frank hugged her back. "You saved yourselves," he said. "I just helped you see it was possible. Will I ever see you again?" Frank smiled. "I have a feeling you will. And in the meantime, you've got a pretty amazing friend in Maya. Take care of each other, okay?" Lily nodded and stepped back. "I will. I promise." Frank climbed back into his truck and pulled away from the shelter, watching in the rearview mirror as Lily waved from the doorway. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "You did it again." He typed back, "We did it. You're the one who connected us." Her response came with a smile emoji. "Team effort. How many is that now?" Frank thought about the question. In the 5 years since that night in Tennessee, he had helped 17 families escape domestic violence. 17 mothers and their children, rescued from nightmares they thought would never end. "I've lost count," he admitted. "Me too," Maya replied, "but every single one matters." Frank smiled as he pulled onto the highway, the New Mexico sun blazing overhead. She was right, of course. Every single one mattered. Every text message, every midnight drive, every scared child in a closet, every mother with bruises she tried to hide. This was his legacy, he realized. Not the miles he had driven or the loads he had hauled, but the lives he had touched. The ripples spreading outward from a single wrong number text 5 years ago. He thought about retirement, about the quiet years ahead. But he knew he would never really stop. There would always be another Lily, another Diane, another family in crisis who needed someone to believe them. And Frank Delgado would be there, because that was what decent people did. His phone buzzed one more time. It was Maya again. "Hey Frank, I have some news." He pulled into a rest stop and typed back, "What kind of news?" "The good kind," she replied. "I graduated from college last month. Got a job offer at a domestic violence shelter in Los Angeles. I start next week." Frank felt tears spring to his eyes. He typed back, "Maya, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you." Her response came quickly. "I learned from the best. You showed me what it means to help people. Now it's my turn." Frank sat in the parking lot for a long time, reading her words over and over. The girl in the closet had become a woman with a mission. The wrong number text had led to a lifetime of purpose. He thought about all the choices that had brought them here. The accident of a mistyped phone number. His decision to respond instead of ignore. The long drive through the night to a house he had never seen. And now, 5 years later, Maya was continuing the work he had started. The ripples were spreading further than he had ever imagined. He typed back, "You're going to change the world, Maya. I always knew it." "Only because you changed mine first," she replied. Frank wiped his eyes and put the truck in gear. The highway stretched before him, endless and full of possibility. He was getting older, his body wearing out from years on the road, but his heart was full and his purpose was clear. Somewhere out there, someone was sitting in a dark room, afraid to ask for help. Somewhere a child was hiding in a closet, hoping someone would hear their cries. Somewhere a mother was trapped in a nightmare she thought would never end. And as long as Frank Delgado drew breath, he would answer when they called. Because that single text message 5 years ago had taught him the most important lesson of his life. Sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right one. Sometimes a stranger's call for help is meant specifically for you. Sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be, even if you do not understand why at the time. "He's hitting my mom again. Please come quick. I'm scared." 9 words that had changed everything. Frank smiled and accelerated onto the highway, heading toward home, toward rest, toward all the miles that still lay ahead. And he kept his phone close, just in case. 1 year later, Frank Delgado stood at a podium in a conference hall in Los Angeles, looking out at a sea of faces. Social workers, shelter directors, domestic violence advocates, and law enforcement officers had gathered for the annual conference on family crisis intervention, and they had asked Frank to speak. He had never been comfortable with public speaking, had spent most of his life in the solitary cab of a truck, talking to no one but himself and the occasional voice on the radio. But Maya had convinced him to come, had told him that his story needed to be heard. She sat in the front row now, beaming at him with that same mix of hope and determination he remembered from the night they met. Frank cleared his throat and began. 6 years ago, I received a text message from a wrong number. A 12-year-old girl named Maya, trying to reach her uncle, accidentally reached me instead. She was hiding in a closet while her mother was being hurt downstairs. She was terrified, alone, and desperate for help. He paused, letting the words sink in. I could have ignored that message. I almost did. But something made me respond. Something made me get in my truck and drive 300 miles through the night to a house I had never seen. And that decision changed my life. He looked at Maya, saw the tears glistening in her eyes. Since that night, I have helped 23 families escape domestic violence. 23 mothers and their children, given a chance to start over. And Maya, the girl who started it all, is now a social worker at a shelter right here in Los Angeles, helping families just like hers. The audience applauded, and Frank waited for the sound to fade before continuing. But I'm not here to talk about what I've done. I'm here to talk about what we can all do. Every single one of us. He leaned forward, his voice growing more intense. There are people all around us who are suffering in silence. People who are afraid to ask for help. People who think they have no options, no way out. He shook his head. That is a lie. There is always hope. There is always a way out. But sometimes, people need someone to show them. Frank looked around the room. That's what we can all do. We can be the person who reaches out. We can be the wrong number that turns out to be exactly right. He paused. I'm just a truck driver, he said simply. I don't have special training, but I saw someone who needed help, and I decided to do something about it. That's all it takes. He stepped back from the podium. So the next time you see something that doesn't look right, don't look away. The next time someone reaches out to you, even by accident, don't ignore it. You never know when a wrong number text might be exactly the call you were meant to answer. The audience rose to their feet, applauding. Frank ducked his head, uncomfortable with the attention, but grateful for the opportunity to share his message. Afterward, Maya found him in the hallway, throwing her arms around him in a fierce hug. That was amazing, she said. You're amazing. Frank shook his head. I just told the truth, he said. You're the amazing one, Maya. Look at everything you've accomplished. She pulled back, her eyes bright with tears. Because of you, everything I am is because you answered that text. Frank smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the crowded room. That's not true, he said. Everything you are was always inside you. I just helped you see it. They walked out of the conference center together, into the bright California sunshine. Frank squinted up at the sky, thinking about how far they had both come. So what's next for you? Maya asked. Frank shrugged. I'm retired now, officially anyway, but I still get texts sometimes. People Maya had connected him with, other advocates who knew his reputation, families in crisis who had heard his story and reached out for help. I guess I'll keep doing what I've been doing, he said, for as long as I can. Maya nodded, a knowing smile on her face. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself too. You've spent 6 years taking care of everyone else. Frank laughed. I'll try. But you know how it is when someone needs help. You answer, Maya finished. I know. I'm the same way now. They walked in companionable silence for a while, enjoying the warm afternoon. Hey, Frank, Maya said eventually, yeah. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had actually reached my uncle that night? If the text had gone to the right number? Frank thought about the question. He had wondered about it many times over the years, had imagined all the different ways that night could have played out. I think about it sometimes, he admitted. But then I remember that it didn't go to the right number. It came to me, and maybe that's exactly how it was supposed to happen. Maya nodded slowly. I think so too, like it was meant to be. Frank did not believe in fate or destiny, not really. He believed in choices, in actions, in the power of individual people to change the world around them. But standing here with Maya, looking at the woman she had become, he could not help but feel that something larger had been at work that night. A wrong number text, a cry for help, a truck driver who decided to answer. And now, 6 years later, 23 families were free. Maya was helping others find their way to freedom. And the ripples continued to spread, touching lives Frank would never know about. Maybe it was meant to be, he said, or maybe we made it be. Either way, I'm glad I answered. Maya smiled, slipping her arm through his. Me too, Frank. Me too. They walked toward the parking lot. Two people bound together by a twist of fate and a choice to help. Behind them, the conference center buzzed with activity. Hundreds of people inspired by Frank's story, ready to go out and make a difference in their own communities. And somewhere, a phone was buzzing with a new message, a cry for help, a wrong number, a chance to change everything. The story was far from over. It was just beginning. Frank Delgado drove home to San Antonio that night. the familiar highways unspooling before him like old friends. He thought about the conference, about Maya, about all the families he had helped over the years. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. He glanced at it, saw an unfamiliar number, and felt the familiar quickening of his pulse. The message was simple, desperate, familiar. "Please help me. My dad is hurting my mom. I don't know what to do." Frank pulled over at the next exit, his hands steady on the wheel. He picked up the phone and typed his response. "Tell me where you are. I'm on my way." The response came immediately, a flood of details and fear and hope. A 13-year-old boy named Carlos, trapped in a house in Houston, watching his family fall apart. Frank calculated the distance. 4 hours, maybe less if he pushed it. He typed back, "Stay hidden, stay safe, help is coming." Then he put the truck in gear and merged back onto the highway, heading east toward Houston, toward another family in crisis, toward another chance to make a difference. The sun was setting behind him, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Frank drove on, his heart full of purpose, his phone close at hand, because that was what he did now. That was who he was. The man who answered wrong numbers, the truck driver who showed up when no one else would, the stranger who believed. And as long as there were children hiding in closets and mothers crying in kitchens and families trapped in nightmares they thought would never end, Frank Delgado would keep answering. He would keep driving through the night. He would keep showing up. Because sometimes that was all it took. Sometimes a single text to a wrong number could change everything. And sometimes the right person was exactly the one you least expected. Frank smiled as the miles disappeared beneath his wheels. He was on his way, and he always would be. The highway stretched before him, endless and full of possibility. The night was falling, but Frank was not afraid of the darkness. He had spent his whole life driving through it, finding his way by the light of his headlights and the glow of his phone screen. And somewhere up ahead, someone was waiting for him, someone who needed help, someone who had sent a message into the void and was praying for an answer. Frank Delgado would be that answer, tonight and every night after, because that was what decent people did. They showed up, they believed, they helped, and in doing so they changed the world, one wrong number at a time. The boy in Houston was named Carlos Martinez, 14 years old with dark hair and darker eyes that had seen too much for someone his age. Frank arrived at the address just after midnight, a small house in a working-class neighborhood where the streetlights flickered and dogs barked at shadows. He had learned a lot in the years since that first night with Maya. He knew to park down the street, to approach carefully, to read the situation before making any moves. He knew which questions to ask, which authorities to contact, which shelters had openings and which were full. Most importantly, he knew that every family was different. Every situation had its own complexities, its own dangers, its own path to safety. Carlos met him at the back fence, a skinny kid in a too-big hoodie who looked like he might bolt at any moment. His mother was inside, Carlos explained, too scared to leave but too hurt to stay. His father had passed out on the couch, a half-empty bottle of whiskey beside him. "It's not always this bad," Carlos said, his voice barely audible. "Sometimes he's okay. Sometimes he's even nice. But when he drinks—" Frank nodded. He had heard variations of this story 100 times. The cycle of abuse, the hope that things would change, the crushing disappointment when they did not. "Your mom," he said gently. "Does she know you reached out?" Carlos shook his head. "She'd be mad. She says we have to stick together as a family, that things will get better." "Carlos," Frank said, kneeling down to meet the boy's eyes, "things don't get better on their own. Not with situations like this. I know that's hard to hear, but it's the truth. Your father needs help that he's not going to get as long as everyone pretends nothing is wrong. So what do I do?" Frank thought for a moment. "The most important thing right now is to make sure you and your mom are safe. Is there somewhere you could go? A relative, a friend, anywhere your father wouldn't think to look?" Carlos's face twisted with thought. "My Aunt Rosa, she lives in Austin. She's always telling Mom she should leave. But Mom never listens. Do you have her number? Carlos nodded and pulled out his phone. Frank took the number and made the call, explaining the situation as quickly and quietly as he could. Rosa listened, asked a few questions, and then said the words Frank was hoping to hear. "Tell them to come now, tonight. I'll be waiting." Getting Carlos's mother to leave was harder. Her name was Elena, and she met Frank at the back door with suspicion and fear written all over her bruised face. "Who are you?" she demanded. "What do you want?" "Mom," Carlos said, stepping forward. "I called him. I asked for help. Please, Mom, we have to go. Aunt Rosa said we could stay with her." Elena's face crumpled. "Carlos, you shouldn't have. You don't understand." "I understand that he hurts you," Carlos said, his young voice cracking with emotion. "I understand that I hear you crying at night. I understand that I'm scared all the time, Mom. All the time. Aren't you tired of being scared?" Elena stared at her son, tears streaming down her face. Then she looked at Frank, this stranger who had appeared in the middle of the night with offers of help. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked. Frank met her eyes steadily. "You don't," he admitted, "but your son trusted me enough to reach out. Your sister is waiting for you in Austin, and every minute we stand here is a minute closer to when your husband might wake up." Elena wavered, her body swaying between the door and the darkness. Then she seemed to make a decision. She straightened her shoulders and turned to Carlos. "Get your things," she said. "Only what you can carry. Meet me at the car in 5 minutes." They were on the road within 10, Frank's pickup truck leading Elena's battered sedan through the quiet streets toward the highway. He kept checking his mirrors, watching for any sign of pursuit, but the road behind them remained empty. 3 hours later, they pulled into Rosa's driveway in Austin. The house was small but well kept, with a porch light burning and a figure waiting at the door. Rosa ran to meet them, gathering Elena into her arms with a cry of relief. "I've been praying for this day," she said. "Every night I've been praying." Frank hung back, watching the family reunion with a familiar mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. Another family safe, another cycle broken, another step toward a better world. Carlos approached him, his young face solemn. "Thank you," he said, "for believing me, for coming." Frank put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You did the hard part, Carlos. Reaching out, convincing your mom. That took real courage." "My dad," Carlos said, his voice dropping. "What happens to him?" Frank considered how to answer. "That depends on your mom," he said finally, "and on him. But whatever happens, you and your mom are going to be okay. You've got family who loves you. That's more than a lot of people have." Carlos nodded slowly, processing the words. "Will I ever see you again?" Frank smiled. "I have a feeling you might. Stay strong, Carlos. And remember, it's okay to ask for help. That's not weakness. That's strength." He drove home as the sun rose over the Texas hills, his body aching with fatigue, but his heart light with purpose. 24 families now, 24 lives changed by the simple act of answering a message. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Heard you were busy last night. Everything okay?" He typed back, "Everything is more than okay. Another family safe." Her response was a string of heart emojis, followed by, "You're my hero, Frank. You know that, right?" He smiled and put the phone down, focusing on the road ahead. Hero was not a word he would ever use for himself. He was just a truck driver who answered his phone. But if Maya wanted to call him a hero, he would not argue. The months that followed brought more calls, more drives, more families. Frank lost count of the miles he traveled, the gas stations where he stopped, the highways he knew as well as the lines on his own face. He developed a network of allies, shelter directors who had his number and called when they needed transport, police officers who knew him by name and trusted his judgment, social workers who consulted him on particularly difficult cases. Maya remained his closest partner, their texts a daily ritual that kept them both grounded. She would share stories from the shelter, the victories and the heartbreaks, the slow progress of healing. He would share stories from the road, the sunrises over mountains, the kindness of strangers, the moments of grace that made the hard work worthwhile. On the 7th anniversary of that first text message, Maya invited Frank to Los Angeles for a special celebration. She would not tell him what it was, only that he needed to be there. He drove out on a Tuesday, arriving at Maya's apartment just as the sun was setting. She met him at the door with a hug that nearly knocked him off his feet. "You came," she exclaimed. "I always come," he reminded her. "You know that." She led him inside, where Jenny and Rosa and a dozen other familiar faces were waiting. Frank blinked in surprise as they burst into applause. "What is this?" he asked, looking around at the crowd. Maya stepped forward, her eyes shining. "This," she said, "is 7 years of gratitude. 7 years of lives saved and families reunited. 7 years of you being the best person I've ever known." She handed him a frame, and Frank looked down at what it contained. It was a collage of photographs, dozens of faces he recognized, and some he did not. Families he had helped over the years, smiling and healthy and free. In the center was a photo of Maya and Frank at her high school graduation, both of them beaming at the camera. "We all contributed," Maya explained. "Every family you helped wanted to say thank you. Some of them flew in just for tonight." Frank felt tears welling in his eyes. He looked around the room at the faces that represented years of midnight drives and anxious texts and moments of crisis transformed into moments of hope. "I don't know what to say," he managed. Jenny stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. "Say you'll let us celebrate you for once," she said. "You've spent so long taking care of everyone else. Let us take care of you tonight." The party lasted until well past midnight, filled with laughter and stories and tears. Frank heard from families he had not seen in years, learned about their journeys, celebrated their triumphs. A woman who had gone back to school and become a nurse. A teenager who had just been accepted to college. A young boy, once hiding in a closet, now playing on his school's basketball team. These were the ripples, Frank realized. The consequences of that single decision to answer a text message 7 years ago. Lives that had been changed, not just saved, but transformed into something beautiful and strong. When the last guest had left and Maya was cleaning up the apartment, Frank sat on her balcony, looking out at the city lights. She joined him with 2 cups of tea, handing one over before settling into the chair beside him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Everything," he said. "The way life works, the way one small choice can lead to something so much bigger." Maya nodded, wrapping her hands around her cup. "Do you remember what you told me that night, when you first got to the house?" Frank thought back, trying to recall. "What did I say?" "You said you made a promise, that you always keep your promises." Frank smiled at the memory. "I did say that, didn't I? You did. And you've kept every promise you've ever made to me, to all of us." She reached over and took his hand. "I was so scared that night," she said softly. "I thought no one would come. I thought I would spend my whole life trapped in that house, watching my mum get hurt, feeling like there was nothing I could do." Frank squeezed her hand. "But you did do something. You reached out." "To the wrong number," Maya laughed. "I still can't believe that worked." "Maybe there are no wrong numbers," Frank said. "Maybe every call for help finds its way to the right person eventually." Maya looked at him, her eyes glistening in the city lights. "That's a beautiful way to think about it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the city below. Frank thought about the road that had brought him here, the choices he had made, the person he had become. "Maya," he said eventually, "I want you to know something." "What?" "Before that night I was lost. I didn't know it then, but I was. My daughter barely spoke to me. My marriage had ended years before. I spent my days driving from one place to another, never stopping long enough to connect with anyone." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "That text message, it didn't just save you, it saved me too. It gave me a purpose. It reminded me that there are things more important than schedules and deliveries and making it to the next stop." Maya's grip on his hand tightened. "You never told me that before." "I didn't know how to say it," Frank admitted, "but it's true. You changed my life, Maya, every bit as much as I changed yours." She leaned over and rested her head on his shoulder. "Then I guess we saved each other." I guess we did. They stayed on the balcony until the sky began to lighten in the east, talking about the past and the future, the families they had helped and the ones still waiting for help. As the first rays of sun broke over the horizon, Maya made a decision. "I want to do more," she said. "The shelter work is good, but it's not enough. There are so many families out there who need help and not enough people to reach them. What are you thinking?" She sat up, her eyes bright with determination. "I want to start an organization, something national, with resources and volunteers and a network of people like us, people who will answer the call, no matter what time it comes." Frank considered the idea. It was ambitious, maybe even impossible, but then again, so was driving 300 miles in the middle of the night to help a stranger. "How would it work?" he asked. Maya pulled out her phone, showing him a document she had been working on. "It's all here. The structure, the funding sources, the partnerships we'd need. I've been planning this for months." Frank scrolled through the document, impressed by the detail and thought she had put into it. "And what would my role be?" Maya smiled. That same hopeful smile he remembered from 7 years ago. "I was hoping you'd help me run it. You know these families, Frank. You know what they need, what works, what doesn't. I can do the organizational stuff, but you're the heart of this." Frank looked at the document, at the lives represented in those pages, at the future Maya was dreaming into existence. It would mean giving up the road, or at least most of it. It would mean settling down, building something permanent. It terrified him. It also felt like exactly what he was meant to do. "I'm in," he said. Maya threw her arms around him. "I knew you would say that. I knew it!" They spent the next month planning, reaching out to potential partners, securing initial funding. Frank called in every favor he had accumulated over 7 years on the road, connecting Maya with shelter directors and law enforcement officers and social workers across the country. The organization launched on the 8th anniversary of that first text message, with a small ceremony at Maya's shelter in Los Angeles. They called it the Wrong Number Project, a name that made Frank smile every time he heard it. Within a year, they had chapters in 12 states and a network of over 200 volunteers. Within 3 years, they had helped more than 500 families escape dangerous situations. By the 5th year, the Wrong Number Project was the largest volunteer-based domestic violence response organization in the country. Frank found himself doing more speaking than driving, traveling to conferences and community events to share his story. He never got comfortable with public speaking, but he understood its power. Every person who heard about Maya's text message was another potential responder, another person who might choose to help when the call came. Maya became the public face of the organization, appearing on news programs and podcasts, meeting with legislators and community leaders. She was poised and articulate, passionate and professional, everything Frank had known she would become. But she always made sure to acknowledge him, to tell the world about the truck driver who had answered her call. "He's the reason I'm here," she would say. "He's the reason any of this exists." Frank would duck his head and wave off the praise, uncomfortable with the attention, but grateful for the opportunity to continue the work. On his 60th birthday, the organization threw him a party. It was much larger than the one 7 years before, with faces from across the country, families and volunteers and partners who had become part of his extended family. Elena and Carlos were there. Carlos, now a college junior studying social work. Lily and Diane were there, Lily engaged to a young man she had met at her new school in Albuquerque. Jenny was there, remarried now to a kind man who treated her the way she deserved to be treated. And Maya was there, of course, standing at the podium to deliver a speech that reduced everyone in the room to tears. 12 years ago, she began, I was a scared 12-year-old girl hiding in a closet, trying to reach my uncle for help. I typed the wrong number. I thought my life was over. She paused, looking at Frank in the front row. Instead, that wrong number turned out to be the rightest thing that ever happened to me. It connected me to a stranger who became a father figure, a mentor, a friend. A man who taught me that there are still good people in this world, people who will show up when you need them most. She held up her phone, the same model she had used that night, preserved as a keepsake. This phone changed my life. But it wasn't the phone that did it. It was the man who answered, the man who drove 300 miles in the middle of the night to help someone he had never met. The man who has spent the last 12 years helping families just like mine find their way to safety. She turned to face Frank directly. "Happy birthday, Frank. Thank you for answering. Thank you for coming. Thank you for showing me what it means to be a good person." The room erupted in applause, and Frank found himself surrounded by people he loved, people whose lives he had touched, people who had become his family in the truest sense of the word. He thought about the road that had brought him here, the long nights, the desperate texts, the moments of fear and hope, the families saved, the cycles broken, the lives transformed. It had all started with a wrong number, and it had led him home. Frank Delgado smiled, surrounded by the family he had found and the family he had made. The work was not done. There were still children hiding in closets and mothers crying in kitchens and families trapped in nightmares they thought would never end. But there was also an army of people ready to answer the call. An organization built on the simple principle that every cry for help deserved a response. A legacy that would continue long after Frank was gone. He looked at Maya, at the woman she had become, and felt a pride so deep it brought tears to his eyes. She caught his gaze and smiled, raising her glass in a silent toast. He raised his glass in return. To wrong numbers, he thought, and the right people who answer them. The party continued into the night, but Frank stepped outside for a moment of quiet, looking up at the stars that had guided him down so many highways. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and looked at the screen. An unfamiliar number, a message. "My stepmom is hurting my little brother. I don't know what to do. Can you help?" Frank smiled and typed his response. "Tell me where you are. Help is coming." He typed the words that had become his calling card, his signature, his purpose, the words that had changed his life and countless others. The response came quickly. A teenager named Jamie from a small town in Kansas, a stepmother who used discipline as an excuse for cruelty, a little brother named Lucas, who was only 8 years old. Frank read the messages carefully, asking the questions he had learned to ask over the years. Where are the adults in the house? Is there a safe room you can lock yourself in? Do you have a neighbor you trust? As he gathered information, he was already planning the logistics. Kansas was far, over 1,000 miles from Los Angeles. But he knew people in the region now. Volunteers who had joined the Wrong Number Project, shelter workers who had attended his training sessions. He made a call to a woman named Patricia, a retired teacher who had become one of their most dedicated volunteers. "I've got a situation in Kansas," he said. "2 kids, possible abuse. Can you get there tonight?" Patricia's response was immediate. "Give me the address. I'm leaving now." Frank coordinated the response from the party, his phone pressed to his ear as he directed Patricia to the location, called the local authorities, and kept Jamie updated through text messages. Within 2 hours, Patricia had arrived at the house. Within 3, the police had intervened and the children were safe. Within a week, they would be placed with their biological mother in Missouri, reunited with the parent who had been fighting for custody for years. Frank returned to the party just as it was winding down, finding Maya waiting for him by the door. "Another one?" she asked. "Another one," he confirmed. She smiled, that knowing smile that said she understood completely. "This is why we do it," she said. "This is why it matters." Frank nodded, feeling the familiar mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. He thought about Jamie and Lucas, about the fear in those text messages, and the relief that would come tomorrow. Another family saved, another cycle broken. Maya linked her arm through his as they walked back toward the crowd. "You know," she said, "when I sent that text 12 years ago, I never imagined any of this. The organization, the volunteers, the lives we've touched. It was just a desperate cry for help. And someone answered, Frank said. You answered. Maya squeezed his arm. You could have ignored it. Most people would have, but you didn't. Frank thought about that moment, the split-second decision that had defined the rest of his life. He thought about all the people who received cries for help every day and looked the other way. The neighbors who heard violence through thin walls and turned up their televisions. The teachers who noticed bruises and convinced themselves it was nothing. It was easier not to get involved. It was safer, simpler, less complicated. But easy and safe and simple had never built anything worth having. Someone has to answer, he said simply. Maya smiled. And now, thanks to you, thousands of people are ready to answer. That's your legacy, Frank. Not just the families you helped personally, but the movement you started, the proof that one person can make a difference. They rejoined the party, mingling with the guests, sharing stories and laughter. Frank found himself in conversation with Carlos, now 20 years old. You know, Carlos said, I've been thinking about what I want to do after graduation. I want to join the Wrong Number Project. I want to be one of the people who answers. Frank felt his heart swell with pride. I think that's a great idea, Frank said. You'd be perfect for it. You understand what these families are going through. Thanks, Frank. That means a lot coming from you. They shook hands. Frank watched Carlos walk away, already knowing that the young man would be one of their best volunteers. The next generation was rising. As the last guests departed and the venue began to empty, Frank stood alone for a moment in the center of the room. 12 years of memories surrounded him, invisible but palpable. The fear and the hope, the desperation and the relief. The faces of children who had been saved and parents who had found the courage to leave. It had all started with a wrong number, and it had become something so much bigger than he ever could have imagined. Maya appeared beside him, holding his jacket, ready to go home. Frank looked around one last time, then nodded. Yeah, he said. I'm ready. They walked out together into the California night, the stars overhead mirroring the lights of the city below. Frank thought about all the highways he had traveled, all the miles that had brought him here. The journey was not over. It never would be, not as long as there were people in need. But for tonight, he was content. For tonight, he was home. His phone buzzed one more time. He glanced at the screen, half expecting another cry for help. Instead, it was a message from Maria, his daughter in Phoenix. Dad, saw the news coverage of your party. I'm so proud of you. Can we talk soon? Frank smiled, tears pricking at his eyes. The relationship with Maria had been slowly healing over the years, rebuilt one conversation at a time. She had seen his work with the Wrong Number Project, had understood for the first time why he had spent so many years on the road. He typed back, I'd love that. Call me any time. Her response was a heart emoji, simple but meaningful. Another relationship restored. Another piece of his life made whole. Frank put his phone away and looked up at the stars. The night was quiet now, peaceful in a way that still surprised him after so many years of chaos and crisis. But he knew it would not last. Tomorrow there would be more messages, more families, more midnight drives. The work never ended. The need never stopped. And Frank Delgado would be there to answer. Because that was who he was. That was what he did. And he would not have it any other way. The morning after his 60th birthday party, Frank woke to the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Maya had insisted he stay at her apartment rather than drive back to his hotel. He found her in the kitchen, already dressed and reviewing documents on her laptop. You're up early, he said, accepting the cup of coffee she poured for him. Board meeting in 2 hours, she explained. We're discussing the expansion into the Pacific Northwest. Frank sat down across from her, marveling at how far they had come. You know, he said, I never thought I'd end up doing something like this. When I was your age, I just wanted to drive my truck and be left alone. Maya looked up from her laptop. What changed? You, Frank said simply. You changed everything. She smiled. No, she said. You were always capable of this. You just needed a reason to see it. His phone buzzed with a message from Jamie, the teenager from Kansas. "Lucas is safe. We're staying with our mom now. Thank you for believing me." Frank showed the message to Maya. "This," she said, "this is why we do it." His phone rang. It was Maria. "Dad." Her voice was hesitant. "Is this a good time?" Frank sat down on Maya's couch. "It's always a good time for you, sweetheart." They talked for over an hour, the longest conversation they had had in years. Maria told him about her life in Phoenix, her job as a veterinarian, her engagement to a man named David. "I want you to come to the wedding," Maria said. Frank felt tears streaming down his face. "I'll be there," he promised. There was a pause. "Dad," Maria said softly, "I'm sorry. For all the years I was angry. I've been reading about your work, and I get it now." Frank wiped his eyes. "I'm the one who should apologize. I wasn't there for you when you needed me." "But you changed," Maria said. "You became someone who helps other people. That matters, Dad." They talked until Maya returned, making plans for Frank to visit Phoenix. When he finally hung up, he felt lighter than he had in years. "Good news?" Maya asked. "The best," Frank said. "My daughter wants me at her wedding." Maya's face broke into a brilliant smile. "Frank, that's wonderful." That afternoon, they drove to the original shelter where Maya had first found safety. The building had been renovated and expanded, now serving 3 times as many families as before. The director met them at the door, a woman named Sandra, who had been there since the beginning. "Frank Delgado," she said, shaking his hand warmly. "Come on, I want to show you something." She led them through the shelter to a room at the back, where a wall was covered with photographs and notes. "We call it the Wall of Hope," Sandra explained. "Every family that comes through here adds something." Frank walked along the wall, reading the messages. "Thank you for saving my life. You gave my children a future. Because of you, I'm free." Maya appeared beside him, pointing to a photograph near the center of the wall. It was the picture from years ago, the one Jenny had added to the wall when they first arrived. Beneath it, in Maya's handwriting from when she was 12 years old, were the words, "A stranger answered my cry for help. Now I'm safe." "We're adding a new wing next year," Sandra said, "dedicated to the Wrong Number Project. We're going to call it the Delgado Wing." Frank turned to her, shocked. "You don't have to do that." "We want to," Sandra said firmly. "You've changed so many lives, Frank." He looked at Maya, who was smiling through tears. "It's already decided," she said. They spent the rest of the afternoon at the shelter, talking with staff and volunteers, meeting families who were currently staying there. One mother, a young woman named Keisha, pulled him aside before he left. "My son wrote you a letter," she said, pressing a folded piece of paper into his hand. Frank unfolded the letter and read it, his eyes growing moist. "Dear Mr. Frank," the letter read in careful, childish handwriting. "Thank you for helping my mum be brave. When I grow up, I want to help people like you do. Love, Marcus, age 7. Frank looked at Keisha, at the hope in her eyes. "Tell Marcus I'm proud of him," he said, "and tell him that helping people is about seeing someone who needs help and doing something about it. That's all it takes." Frank left the shelter as the sun was setting. Maya walked beside him, silent but present. They drove back to her apartment as night fell. His phone buzzed with a text. "Hi, Frank. This is Lily from Albuquerque. I graduated from high school today. I'm going to college to study psychology. Thank you for giving me a future." Frank smiled. He typed back, "Congratulations, Lily. I'm so proud of you." Maya glanced at his phone. "Another success story?" "The best kind," Frank said. They pulled into her parking garage and made their way up to her apartment. Maya handed him a cup of tea and sat down across from him. "Frank," she said, "I've been thinking about the future, about what happens when you're not able to do this anymore." Frank nodded slowly. He was 60 years old, and the midnight drives were getting harder. "I've been training people," he said, "passing on what I know." "But I do," Maya said quietly. "I still need you." Frank reached across and took her hand. "And I'll be here," he said, "for as long as I can." Maya squeezed his hand. "Promise?" "I promise," Frank said. And you know I always keep my promises." They sat in comfortable silence, sipping their tea, watching the city lights through the window. Frank thought about all the promises he had made over the years, all the ones he had kept, the lives he had touched. It had started with a wrong number, and it had led him here, to this moment, to this family he had found and built and cherished. The road stretched on ahead, uncertain and full of possibility. But Frank was not afraid. He had people who loved him. He had work that mattered. He had a legacy that would continue long after he was gone. And somewhere out there, right now, someone was sending a message into the darkness, hoping for help, and someone would answer. Because that was what decent people did. They showed up. They believed. They helped. And in doing so, they changed the world, one wrong number at a time.